Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Online Sociologist. I'm Ryan. In this first video on Georg Simmel's definition of sociology, we're going to do a deep dive into his vision of the field and focus on how he wrestled with the most basic question of all. What exactly is sociology, and what does it study? Now, I'm drawing here from the opening chapter of the book, The Sociology of Georg Simmel, which was edited and translated by Kurt Wolff in 1950. Now, this is an English translation of Simmel's own 1908 book entitled Sociology: Investigations on the Form of Association. And this first chapter that we're looking at is entitled The Field of Sociology. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more content related to sociology. Now, Simmel wasn't only interested in a particular field of sociology, but came to question the discipline as a whole. He struggled with what exactly sociology was and really didn't see his contemporaries providing any clear answers. Unlike biology or physics, which had a clear subject matter, Simmel believed that sociology suffered from confusion and constant debate over its methods, aims, and subject matter. At the heart of this confusion, however, Simmel came to an even greater question. If sociology is a study of society, then what exactly do we mean by society? Before giving his own answer, Simmel first looks at what his contemporaries were saying about the nature of society. The first critique came from what is known as the German historicist school, which held enormous influence over 19th-century German scholarship. Thinkers such as Leopold von Ranke or Wilhelm Dilthey and Theodor Mommsen argued that human life can only be understood through history. Their work rested on four major commitments, which I want to go over here. First, they emphasize particularism, which is the idea that every event is unique and should be studied on its own terms. Second, they embrace contextualism, which is the belief that human life can only be explained through its cultural and historical settings. Third, they relied on empiricism, meaning a strong dependence on archival evidence and detailed narrative reconstructions. And finally, they expressed a deep suspicion of theory. Rather than searching for universal laws or abstractions, historicist scholars concentrated on describing what happened in precise details within specific contexts. Now, from the German historicist perspective then, society itself appeared too insubstantial to study. They saw society as nothing more than an abstraction, while individuals and their lived histories were the only real objects of investigation. The second critique came from the opposite end of the spectrum, as some scholars argued that the concept of society was too vast and encompassing to be adequately studied. Furthermore, they argued if all human behavior occurs within society, and if every science of humans is really about studying the social, then sociology as an academic discipline has no boundaries at all. And by that logic, sociology would swallow up other disciplines like history, psychology, economics, and politics, leaving nothing outside of its reach. Simmel rejected both of these extremes. To reduce society to nothing or expand it to everything, he argued, made it lose its distinctive value. Instead, he argued that sociology needs to begin by clarifying the concept of society through a particular type of intellectual work, which he saw as synthesis. By this, he meant synthesis as the act of combining details into larger patterns of meaning. Simmel pushed this point further by noting that synthesis is something that we do constantly. Knowledge is never about isolated facts, but instead about weaving them together into patterns that we can recognize. We don't just see scattered details. Instead, we organize them into categories and meanings. To illustrate this, Simmel pointed to examples from his own time, such as Gothic architecture or the ancient Battle of Marathon, where we see patterns that go beyond individual buildings or individual soldiers. But updating his point for today, we might look at the musical genre of hip hop. No single track defines the genre. But when you bring together features like rhythmic beats, lyrical flow, sampling, and performance style, the larger pattern becomes clear. Think of the differences between artists like Kendrick Lamar, Nicki Minaj, Eminem, and Jay-Z. They each sound distinct, yet we still recognize them all as hip-hop. Even within subgenres like trap, boom bap, or conscious rap, the variations work as part of a shared musical and cultural form. And this is exactly Simmel's point. Collective realities emerge not from a single element, but from the synthesis of many parts. And this gets us to Simmel's larger claim. If we refuse to synthesize and insisted only individuals were real, knowledge itself would collapse. We can no longer talk meaningfully about genres like hip-hop, communities like gamers, or disciplines like sociology. Each of these is made up of countless individual contributions, but taken together, they form recognizable and enduring patterns that shape how people live, learn, and identify themselves. Simmel then takes this further by turning the critique back on the German historicists themselves. He challenges their central idea that the individual is the irreducible unit of study. Individuals, he argues, are themselves shaped by traits, histories, and forces beyond themselves. Even qualities like ambition, taste, or intelligence are influenced by prior interactions. To stop the chain of explanation at the individual is just as arbitrary and just as misleading as stopping it at society. For Simmel, the real task was not to choose between individuals or society as the foundation, but to rethink how sociology should approach the problem altogether. Sociology does not need to prove society exists in a way that a tree or a molecule does. Instead, it provides a framework for seeing the world differently. Out of interaction, new realities emerge. Things like roles, customs, obligations, and institutions. These are not imaginary. They have real effects, and they shape people at the same time that people shape them. And this leads to his core insight. Society is not a thing, but a way of seeing. It's not a substance hovering above us, but a form that flows between us. When Simmel says society is simply the name for individuals connected by interaction, he is not being dismissive, but instead precise. So, let's take a step back. In this video, we've seen how Simmel wrestled with the most basic question of sociology, which is, what does it actually study? He rejected the idea that society is nothing more than individuals, and he also rejected the idea that it's everything all at once. Instead, he showed that society is best understood as a form that arises through interaction. It's not a substance that we can point to, but instead a way of seeing the connections that make human life possible. And this way of seeing, grounded in synthesis, is what gives sociology its distinct value. I want to thank you all for watching, and if you want to learn more about Simmel or other foundational thinkers in sociology, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, or critiques, please make sure to leave a comment below. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.